morning, good morning, good morning. We are on lesson 4. We're starting a new week. So lesson 4 is living on your own. Kind of moving out the house. Y'all know what that means. A lot of y'all are like, oh, I'm moving out as soon as I'm whatever. So this is actually the technicalities that come with moving out. So first things you need to take into consideration are the moving in costs. So usually when you move into a new apartment, it's rent for the first and last month. They charge you like a cleaning deposit, usually around $80. Security deposit, which is usually a pretty big amount. Utilities deposit and telephone deposit. Telephone deposit isn't a thing anymore because we don't have house phones. But back in the day before cell phones were a thing, you would have a telephone deposit. So basically, I think you know what each of these mean. I'll break down security and utility deposit. Security deposit is, let's say you jack the apartment up when you live there, they would keep that amount to be able to fix maybe a hole you put in a wall. Or let's say you break the lease early. That gives them enough money to make sure they're still getting their dots and I's crossed. Utilities are paying electric, light, gas, those type of bills, okay? Moving costs can include renting a truck, hiring movers, packing supplies. Moving is so expensive. Last time I moved and hired movers, they were $600. So it is not a cheap thing to move. This is something that needs to be taken in consideration and saved up heavily for. You shouldn't be just on the whim moving because it costs a lot of money. When preparing your budget, keep in mind your personal and financial goals, your income, your lifestyle, your fixed expenses, flexible expenses, moving costs, moving in costs, the cost of setting up house. You should not spend any more than 28% of your net income on rent or mortgage payment. So an example of that would be, it won't let me put the calculator in the recording, but basically, let's say you make like $500 a month, right? So 500 times 12 is what? Like 6,000, right? So anyway, you would take the amount you pay for rent. So maybe you're making like, or paying like $200 in rent, which is extremely reasonable. Would that equal out? You would do the 200 over the entire amount you're making. Same way you check your grades. If that percentage is not less than 0.28, then you are paying too much. You're paying outside of your means. Moving on. So this is kind of how you budget a move. How much income are you getting from both jobs? If you have more than one. What is the rent price? What are you paying for your car insurance, your car payment? Flexible expenses, savings, food, utilities, clothing, entertainment, household, personal. You want to take all these things into consideration as you're moving. It's a lot of budgeting. Okay. This is ideally how a lease would look. You have an activity today where you have to read through a lease and answer questions. I had to read through a lease yesterday, a real lease, coincidentally. But you want to read all of the ins and outs, cross your dots, cross your T's, dot your I's to make sure you really understand what's going on before you put your name on this dotted line. I know if I were wanting to break my lease right now, it would cost me $2,850. So that's something you don't want to ever take lightly. You want to read through it slowly and make sure you understand what's going on. So this lease was made August 27th by this person. The landlord leases to the tenant in San Francisco, and then they give the address. This property is available only as personal residence and should not be used for business. That person would not be able to put an Airbnb. You know how some people rent out to people coming from out of town? They would not be able to do that. They can only use it for business purposes only. The term of this lease shall be for 1 year, and it ends that exact date on the following year. The tenant shall pay the landlord $850 a month. That's not bad. $850 a month on the first day of each month. Rent should be payable without notice or demand at the address. So this landlord doesn't have like a system set up. You have to pay in hand. And the late fee is $100 if it's not received by the 3rd. This person is strict. Most people give you to the 5th before they attach a late fee, but this person says the 3rd. Utilities. The landlord should provide the tenant with 2 sets of keys. Tenant agrees to provide the landlord with new set should locks be changed at any point. Tenant should make all arrangements and pay for all gas, heat, light, power, telephone, other utilities. So a lot of apartments will come with utilities included, especially when you all get to college. Almost any apartment you find is going to have your utilities included. Some will not. And when that is the case, you call the gas company and get it set up. You call the light company and get it set up. But when it's all included, it does make your life a lot easier and it's at a fixed rate. Hold harmless. Tenants shall hold the landlord harmless from against any claims arising using the occupancy of the premises, except for landlord's willful and gross negligent conduct. So an example of that is maybe you report that, hey, it's roaches in my house and no one's doing anything about it. And you keep telling them and they haven't sent any type of exterminator out and you have the proof. That's when you can like take them to court or probably be able to break lease a little earlier. Tenant hereby assumes financial risk of damage to property or injury to persons in or about the premises. Tenant shall not alter the premises in any significant way without approval. So I know I have a friend that's an artist and she loves to paint her apartments. She usually is able to do that. What they say is you need permission, so she'll ask for permission and she has to sign something saying she's going to paint it back the way it was before she leaves. Default. If tenants shall default and breach any covenant, then the landlord, required by law, may re-enter the premises and remove any property and any persons. I wouldn't have signed this lease because what this is saying is, let's say the person does not pay their rent. This landlord can come in and take their TV or take their gaming system, and that's kind of scary. Holding over. If tenant with the landlord's consent remains in possession of the premises after the expiration of the lease, such possession shall be a tenancy from month to month at a rental in the amount of the last month's rent. Tenant must notify the landlord in writing at least 30 days prior to evacuating the premises. All other provisions remain the same. Okay, so they do give you like a month to month rent, an amount of the last month's rent if you need to stay over and have not found a place when it's time to move. Waivers. No waiver by landlord of any provision shall be deemed a waiver of any other provision. Okay. Security deposit. This is the deposit I was telling y'all that's usually a little pricey. The security deposit of $1,000 is to be paid by the tenant. Will be held by the landlord for the duration of the tenancy. Landlord shall repay the tenant this sum plus any interest and minus any charges for damages within the 30 days of the termination. So what that is saying is their security deposit is more than their rent, but the landlord needs that for safety reasons. Let's say they leave early and the landlord doesn't have that 30-day notice, they'll be able to use that $1,000 towards the mortgage. Okay. Ooh. Tenants' rights. Withholding rent if the landlord doesn't make repairs in a reasonable amount of time. Safe and sanitary premises. No changes in terms and conditions for the length of the lease. So I get scared with that kind of stuff. I know a lot of people do it. Let's say my doorknob is broken and I'm like, hey, I need the doorknob replaced. And they don't do the amount of time, you can withhold the rent. Now, the reason I don't like doing that is because sometimes it's ways for them to say, okay, you could withhold the rent for that time, but now you owe me double when it's time for your next rent to be due. And that's scary. Tenants' responsibilities: paying rent on time, using the rental for the purpose stated in the lease, so to live, taking reasonable care of the property, notifying the landlord if any major repairs are needed, giving notice of leaving at the end of the lease, and giving notice of leaving before lease is up, and paying rent for balance of the lease if landlord can't find new tenants, paying for any damage to the walls, floors, and furniture, not making alterations that the landlord will have to fix later. Like my friend, she would need to paint it back how it was. Giving landlord a new set of keys if you change the locks. Paying all of the rent if roommates move out and you stay. So these are the landlord's rights. Those were the tenant's rights. Landlord's rights. They have the right to charge extra if your rent is late. They can tax you and keep upcharging you. They can keep part or all of the security deposit if you leave before your lease ends. Charging rent through the length of the lease, even if you aren't living on the premises. If you leave, your credit is going to be jacked up if you are not ending your lease the proper way. I had a friend who did that, and she owed like $16,000, right? So that's a ridiculous amount. Charging, keeping all or part of security deposit if you damage walls, floors, or fixtures, or if you make alterations. And that's their security. If they have to hire a painter who costs $800, now they're safe because they have your security deposit. Keeping all or part of the cleaning deposit if you don't leave the premises clean when you move out. Something funny I did with my very first apartment, I hired my own cleaning lady to clean it because I knew that their cleaning rate was a lot higher. And so I was able to use her, and she was able to get it done cheaper for me, and they didn't have to get it done again. Landlord's responsibilities, making repairs in a reasonable amount of time, keeping premises safe and sanitary, entering premises only at agreed upon time to make repairs, unless there is an emergency, or to show the apartment to potential renters if you are moving out, paying interest on deposit money, collecting rent, and maintaining exterior grounds of building. Okay, so these are the landlord's rights. These were the tenant's rights and responsibilities. I do want to pause and just go through what you have to do today in case you're confused. Okay, so these are the objectives for today. Set up a budget that includes rent, moving expenses, and expenses associated with setting up a household. I skipped a lot of those because y'all would have been having 2 hours of work to do. But you still need to kind of set up a budget, imagining with that career you talked about last week, how much would you pay? Understand the rights and legal responsibilities of a tenant. Understand the rights and legal responsibilities of a landlord, and read and interpret various clauses in a lease. So on this first slide, it says, on a sheet of paper, prepare an itemized list of every major object in your room, including furniture, linens, and creature comforts. Then estimate the cost of each item and answer the questions below. So that'll be like you looking around your room. As I look around now, I see my 2 chairs I purchased. Those were $100 each, right? I see my TV. I don't know how much it cost. It was a Christmas gift, but I'm sure it was a pretty large amount. I see a bookshelf. I see couches. I see light fixtures, pictures. I'm going to count up how much all that costs. How did the total compare to what you expected? How much does the room you look around cost? And how much do you expect it to cost? And if you don't know how much it costs, you can kind of Google, okay, how much does a bed cost? How much does a TV cost, right? And then that'll show you kind of like the worth of what all you have to pay. Which other items did you underestimate the cost of? Which items did you overestimate the cost of? I had no idea furniture was as expensive as it was when I was young. You're just a kid. You flop down on the furniture. It's nothing. Google how much couches cost. It's crazy. Here you have, I'm not going to read through this because we just went through one together. You would read through this lease like I read through the one with you. And then here you're going to answer the questions based off of that lease. Okay? You're going to answer the questions. And then you can press back, obviously, if you need to keep going through the lease. So, I'm going to put anything for this. You don't put anything because you'll have a missing if you do. But I just want to get the answers. Get through this. Okay. Next, on a sheet of paper, prepare an itemized list of every major object in your bedroom, including furniture, linens, and creature comfort. Is it the same thing? Now, hold on. I think we got the wrong picture up. Okay, so you'll only have to do this once. I'm gonna go in and delete this first picture. Some of y'all might have did this already, but I'm gonna go in and delete the first picture because it's an activity that's later on in the lesson. So it's less work. So yes, this is actually the point where you will answer that question. Next, after that, you have another lease you read through, and you would decide if you would sign this rental agreement by going through these questions. I'm glad I went through this with y'all. That would have been a hot mess. Okay. So you would read through that lease and decide if you would live there. And then the last thing is your quiz, okay? And the quiz is actually directly going in a grade book. So as soon as you finish the quiz, it automatically goes in your grade book. So make sure you're using your POE and taking your time. I'm going to go delete that extra picture I put in that's at the beginning when it should only be in the middle. And that is it. I will see y'all tomorrow. And tomorrow's lesson is on, hold on. Buying a home. So that's exciting. So I will see y'all tomorrow. Bye.